Thank you so much. Welcome to the conclave. I'd like to first echo the words from the government of Kerala this morning and also from IBM. We are so grateful that you're here. So grateful that you're here. We're really lucky to be alive in this time in the computing industry. Of course, AI is growing, we think, faster than any other technology before, and it really is a lifetime opportunity, a rare lifetime opportunity. And so again, thank you so much for being here. As the Honorable Chief Minister said this morning, many sectors of our society are going to be affected positively by AI. So again, thank you for being here. Let me also first thank the event team who have organized this. Thank you so much for all your help. David and Amanda, wherever you are, thank you for your help. And Dinesh, thank you, of course, for the opportunity to be here. Now, a message to our honored guests who are both in the audience and also watching us on streaming. Thank you. Thank you so much for your contribution to making our society better. The work that you've done and the work that you will do is making people's lives better. It's making people's lives better. And the reason I mention this is I think it's really important to remember that you are mission-driven. And what I mean by mission-driven is you have a really noble cause. Your products are helping our members of our society address all of the challenges they face. And so I hope that on a daily basis you remember that you are mission-driven by the work you have done and the work you will do. And so on a daily basis you feel that pride for what you do. And on the really tough days, it'll inspire you. And I can tell you, when I was at NASA, we had some really bad days. And so knowing that we were making people's lives better, contributing and mission-driven, gave me the courage to continue. And by the way, both of these organizations, their main goal is to make people's lives better. And I'll mention that again a couple or three times throughout the presentation. So thank you for being mission-driven. My goal today is to speak for about 38 minutes. And during those 38 minutes, I'll certainly share with you what it's like to fly in space. It was fantastic. But in parallel, I'll be describing how in the exploration business, we make amazing things happen against really, really big challenges. And so that's the main purpose I'm actually here today. A couple questions for all of you, and by a show of hands, I'd appreciate your response. First of all, how many of you have ever watched a movie about space, fiction or nonfiction? Star Trek, Star Trek, Mission Mongol, right? Okay, the right stuff. Great, Apollo 13. Great, the next one is, and don't be embarrassed to answer this, how many of you ever in your life, even for a moment, dreamed of being an astronaut or still want to be an astronaut? How many of you? Okay, wow, that's a lot. So for the people watching, we've got about 70% of the people with their hands up. Well, the next one is for fun. So this is theoretical. This actually isn't planned. This is theoretical. So I want you to imagine at the end of today's presentation, we had free tickets to give out. We actually don't have them. This is theoretical. But how many of you, by a show of hands, and keep your hand up just for a minute so I can get a good feeling for how many of you are interested, how many of you at the end of the presentation today would accept a free ticket for a 30-minute rocket ship ride into space in about a month? So keep your hands up. Let me just look around. Wow. So for the people streaming, we've got maybe 80%. Some people have two hands up. This is theoretical. Okay, don't rush the stage afterwards. This isn't actually going to happen. Okay, some of you are shocked that the person next to you has their hand up. Some of you are shocked the person next to you doesn't have their hand up. But some of you are actually doing a little artificial intelligence while I was asking the question. You were kind of thinking about it, looking around, deciding whether to raise your hand or not. That's not a good idea. You need to either be up or down. In any case, those tickets are available now. There is commercial spaceflight now. If we did have them, they would be 33 million rupees each. And you actually can also buy tickets to kind of go all the way around the world on a 4 to 10-day trip. Those tickets are 4.6 billion rupees right now. So they're very expensive still. In any case, flying in space was fantastic, and I can't wait to tell you about that. But first, we have a little background to give you, and that's that we haven't told you this yet, but I come from an IBM family. So my dad, Bob Smith, worked for IBM for 40 years, and I was so lucky to be in that environment day after day, week after week, year after year, and decade after decade because I was learning the skills that IBM teaches its employees on leadership, teamwork, technology, how to solve problems, and things like that. And so that was this set of skills that I learned very early and for decades. And I can tell you, years later, when I applied to NASA to be an astronaut, that absolutely was one of the top reasons that they picked me, because I had the skills that I had learned as a family member at IBM. My dad ended up, as you started as an engineer and ended up, again, working there for 40 years. He's still alive, he's 96. And I called him the other day and I said, I'm headed to Kochi. And he said, well, make sure that you tell them how grateful I am, for the great work they're still doing. He still follows the technology industry very carefully. He still loves IBM. And just to give you some sense of what it's like to work for IBM for 40 years, this mission-driven job, this joyful job. In that picture on the right side, you'll see a frame. That picture is an award that he got from IBM in 1966. And after 50 years, it's still on his wall. That's how proud he is. He wasn't the only member. Thank you. He'll ask if I passed along his message. He wasn't the only person that worked for IBM. So I did too. And so when I was done with university, it was a very easy decision where to go because they were heavily involved and one of the leaders in a new technology called semiconductors or chips. And I knew it was a place where I would develop these skills even more on leadership, teamwork, problem solving, etc. And I took those skills with me through my career all the way to this place right now. But when I applied to NASA as an IBM employee, I am sure that that was one of the top reasons they hired me. So I'm so grateful to IBM for having grown up in an IBM family and also to have been an employee. Now, IBM's been part of America's space program for a long time and played major roles. You may have noticed even today out in the hall, we have a display on a joint NASA-IBM effort to develop some new AI models for climate prediction. IBM first went and started working with space a long time ago. Thomas Watson, the first CEO, established the astronomical computing branch at Columbia University in New York in the 1930s, so 20 years before NASA was even installed. And with these pictures, these are heritage pictures, historic pictures. You notice that IBM worked both on the ground in the computing systems, but also in flight. So the three pictures on the left show some of the groundwork that we did. This is Melba Roy, by the way, on the far left. She's one of the mathematicians that helped integrate the IBM computers into the space program, and she was made famous in the movie Hidden Figures. It's a great movie to watch. The picture, by the way, on the middle and the bottom is from the Kennedy Space Center Launch Control Center. And at any time during the Apollo program, there were at least 4,000 IBMers helping us get to the moon. And it's commonly known that if we had not had IBM, we would not have made it to the moon. Now, on the right is a picture of some engineers with a computer for a spaceship, the Gemini spaceship. You can see behind them is the simulator for the Gemini. You can see they have a computer. So we actually had computers in space, too, on the spaceships, including the space shuttle, which happens to be the vehicle that I flew on. So 5 AP-101s controlled the space shuttle flight from 31 seconds before launch. They took control of the space shuttle then, and took control of the shuttle all the way through until we were done with the mission on the runway. One of the major jobs that those computers had is to make sure that the 3 main engines on the space shuttle were operating correctly. So they would command those 3 engines on at T-minus 6 seconds. So for 6 seconds, those engines are running. The computers are making sure they're okay because you do not want to launch unless those 3 engines were okay. Well, on my very first launch, 1.9 seconds before launch, the computers determined that one of the engines was bad. So it stopped the launch. Inside we had alarms going off. There was a lot of vibration going back and forth. But if we had launched that day, we would not have survived. So I was 1.9 seconds away from launching into space on a doomed vehicle, and IBM's computers saved my life. So, yeah, it's incredible. To this day, it's still a little bit strange for me to think it was that close. In any case, so IBM's been involved with the space program for a long time, and I was lucky enough to grow up in a family of IBMers, worked at IBM, and then IBM saved my life. So I'm so grateful for that. Well, flying in space was an incredible experience. And I will take you along on what it's like today so you know what it was like to launch, what it's like to be in zero gravity. It's quite magical. And then what it's like to go outside the spaceship for a spacewalk. But in parallel, I want to describe to you how in the space program we make the impossible possible. We make the impossible possible. We overcome great odds to make big goals come true. And so I'm here today to help you do the same thing, to make big dreams and big goals come true. Now I can tell you behind this mask I have a big smile on my face, and that's because I had just finished fixing the Hubble Space Telescope. You can imagine how relieved I was. Just before launch, I was told that Hubble was worth 500 billion rupees. So you can imagine how nervous I was and how relieved I was at this point. But now here I am having finished that spacewalk, and I can tell you, despite this looking like a peaceful moment, constant diligence is required, scanning the environment that I'm in case anything comes up that I have to address, just like you should do in business, right? And the constant ability that if you do discover something that's wrong, to come up with a creative solution to solve that problem. And then the third thing that's required is, of course, to take action, just like you want to do in business. And I'm practicing those procedures because of where I am. I'm wearing that spacesuit because there's no air where I am. The most inner layer of material in that spacesuit is just 4 millimeters thick, keeping the oxygen inside. I'm being exposed to a 220 degrees centigrade change in temperature in my environment every 45 minutes, from cold to hot or hot to cold. I'll explain why later. I'm being exposed to excessive radiation, about 275 chest X-rays worth of radiation. I'm traveling really fast too, 28,000 kilometers per hour, about 10 kilometers per second, about 10 times the speed of a bullet. And so that's why I have this special suit on. It's fast-paced, it's complicated, and it's also very dynamic. Things are changing, it's very dynamic. We have resource constraints, of course. We have stakeholders, so people who are interested in how we're doing, the people that invested in us and supported us. And we also have competition. And so if those 6 characteristics sound familiar of this environment, over here, this environment, they actually describe your business world today also. And so that's why the techniques that I will share with you from this environment that helps us be successful will also be useful to you in your business and also in your personal life. Now I'm going to call the mindset the explorer's mindset, but it's also similar to the mindset of very successful people, entrepreneurs, go-getters, pathfinders, creative people, etc. But I'm going to call it the explorer's mindset, and I'm sure that you've already used many aspects of it, but I want to make sure that you know how easily it is to use, how advantageous it is to use, and how it can benefit your team too. So that's called the explorer's mindset. Now the first attribute of the explorer is they have this really big desire for big goals, big goals. And so the word that I usually use to describe that is audacious. Audacious, you may not be familiar with that word, but it means really big goals. So that's the first thing they do. They're not looking for little incremental gains in anything. They're looking for big steps, just like the Indian space program has over the years. The first launch was in 1975 of a satellite. Then Ravish followed them on a spacecraft that went to the Salyut space station. So again, we're building up. The next thing that happened is India sent the Mars orbital mission, the MOM mission, to Mars. You should be so proud of that mission, which was made famous by the Mission Mongol movie, which is a fantastic movie. But you should be so proud of that mission because it was the first time any country in the world had made it successfully to another planet on their first try. So that was the mission, Mars orbital mission. And so we're building. And then you had 3 citizens of Indian descent flying to space on other vehicles. The first was Kalpana Chawla. She was born in Haryana. We call her KC. She went on the space shuttle. And then she was followed by Sunita Williams, Sunny. Sunny also flew on the space shuttle and also flew on the Boeing Starliner. She's in space right now. And they were followed by Rajachari, who's on the lower right there. Raja flew into space on a SpaceX vehicle. And so the reason, I want to just pause here for a second because, of course, all of you know that Kalpana died on the Columbia accident. And the reason I mention it here just for a moment is to go back to something I said before. All 5 of us in this picture, I am with an Indian rocket the day before it launched, all 5 of us knew what the risks were in this business, but we still took the risk because we knew that our work would make people's lives better. So we were all mission driven. We knew what the risks were, but we decided to pursue them anyway. And Casey was a really good friend of mine, and she lived her entire life like that, always trying to help other people, always trying to make other people's lives better. And so that's why we took the risk, and that's why we come back to that same theme of being mission driven. So again, India is progressing ahead. Late last year, another spectacular success. First time anybody's ever done this. India landed on the moon, on the polar region. That's where we think the ice is. And to show you how hard this is, in only the last 11 months, 4 other attempts followed your attempt to land on the moon. All of them failed. The Russians failed, the Japanese failed, and 2 American private companies failed. And so we're making this progress, okay? And then if that wasn't enough, then India named its first 4 astronauts to go to the moon and then on to Mars. And I heard one of the astronauts, by the way, is from Kerala. Someone told me that this morning. So we're building. You should be so proud of that, of the Indian space program. So explorers want to do these big things, right? These audacious goals. And we always want to think about this all the time, not just on things that are a long time away, but things that are a year away, or months away, or days away, or weeks away, or minutes away, all the time. And we want to think this way because it makes us happy, and it makes us more successful. All of the data shows that if you set these audacious goals, you'll do better. And so that's what explorers are doing. Sometimes these ideas, by the way, are so audacious, there's that word I'm using again, so audacious that they're laughable, which means when you tell people them, they laugh. So they're laughable. And I'll give you an example in the space program. In the space program, a South African immigrant came to NASA about 15 years ago and said, I have ways where I can reduce the cost of launching a rocket 50 to 85%. Not 5 to 8.5%, 50 to 85%. And so NASA's reaction was to laugh at Elon Musk. But here we are 15 years later, and SpaceX has actually done that. They've reduced the cost of launch 50 to 85%. So sometimes these are laughable. So just as the space programs have progressed and overcome challenges along the way, and they've thought audaciously, so has the IT industry. The IT industry had continually had to evolve for many reasons. One is the demands of the customer, looking for faster computers with more memory, et cetera, but also other events like global pandemics, climate change, the rise of cyber criminals, et cetera. And so the industry has responded, and IBM has responded with faster computers, computers with more memory, computers that are more safe. For example, the IBM Z series is already quantum safe through very, very special software inside the mainframe Z systems. And computers have had to be more reliable. Some of the Z system customers are reporting 7 nines worth of reliability. That means those computers are 99.99999% reliable. That means during a year they're only down a couple seconds. So incredible, audacious achievements. But now we have artificial intelligence. So what has IBM done in this area in terms of being audacious? Well, they've been working on AI for years, but in the last 2 or 3 years, they came up with some new audacious thoughts. One is they thought, why don't we make an open, transparent, trusted series of models that'll be faster than the other models, will be more accurate than the other models, and that will take less coding space, so they'll be smaller than some of the other models. And we're going to put in place a really trusted, vetted, governed system to make sure that when we build the AI models and train the AI models, it'll be so trustworthy that we're going to go ahead and let their customers have all the rights, and indemnify the use. So those are huge, audacious goals, really incredible, and we'll come back to see how IBM did those. In any case, my audacious goal very early was to be an astronaut. I started really falling in love with what they were doing. I drew this picture on the left when I was 7 years of age. You can see I'm outside the spaceship. I've got a big red wrench doing a spacewalk, ready to fix something. Now, in this technical crowd, I know you'll notice there's some technical inaccuracies with this picture. It's not a good idea to be outside the spaceship during the launch, for example. So that's not a good idea. You can see the engines are still running. In any case, it's this audacious goal, right? And on the right, you can see my sister and I at Disneyland in California, where they have all the amusement rides. And you'll notice that we're in the space-themed area. Over my left shoulder, you see a rocket ship raced ride. And there I met my very first astronaut. So when we pick these big, audacious goals, you can see how excited we are about them by my posture, right? I mean, 7-year-old boys usually don't pose for a picture like that. I do want to bring your attention also to the girl in the picture, my sister. She's 5 years older than I am, and she also had an audacious goal to be a police officer, which was pretty unusual. In any case, she went on to college and did really well in school and became one of America's first women FBI agents. So she was an FBI agent for 25 years. She always asks me if they applauded when I mention that story, so I'll tell her. But you can imagine my parents, they had 2 kids with dangerous jobs. One has a gun and is chasing criminals around, the other one's riding a bomb into space, so we stressed our parents out. But in any case, that first thing I want you to remember is always think big, always think big. It'll make you happier and more successful. Now, the second part of the explorer's mindset, this mindset they have, is how they're going to react on the way to this big dream when something bad happens along the way. There's a challenge, you make a mistake, you run out of resources, something happens on the way to this dream. And in exploration, we know that this path is not going to be easy. And so we're prepared before we go. And so we have this mindset that when that happens, when there's some issue that's in front of me, I'm actually going to view it as a learning opportunity and a chance for me to come up with some really clever solution to that problem. And so when the problems do occur in the exploration business, we're coming along to this dream, they happen, we're certainly not going to retreat. Instead, we're going to innovate in a timely manner and come up with these wild solutions that are sometimes laughable, sometimes they're just so outrageous that people laugh at them, but that's how we're going to keep going. We're not going to use solutions from the past, by the way, from the 20th century, from the year 2000, 2005, 2010. Those are old solutions. We're going to call those options A and B. Instead, when we come up to that issue, we're going to come up with this open mindset and come up with some really clever solution, and we're going to call it option X. So in our pursuit of these audacious goals, we have to come up with these incredible solutions sometimes that we're going to call option X. And I can tell you the mindset that we have when we're in this mode is we are convinced that no matter what comes up, we're going to resolve the issue. No matter what comes up, we're going to resolve the issue. So back to this audacious goal. So how did SpaceX come up with options to reduce the cost 50 to 85%? They came up with some option X's. They decided that instead of building really tall buildings to build the rockets in, that they could just use normal buildings and build the rockets sideways, take the rocket out to the pad, and stand it up. Instead of having 2 factories that are making engines for the rockets, the small engine that goes on top, the big engine that goes on the bottom, they said, why don't we have 1 factory, and we'll put 1 of those engines on the bottom and 9 on the bottom. 1 on top and 9 on the bottom, so only 1 engine factory. They also realized that if they built everything in-house, they could make it cheaper, so they vertically oriented. But the really most interesting option X they chose was to try and get the rocket come back to Earth after it delivered its spacecraft into space. That's really hard to do because the rocket is 50 kilometers in the air. It's going thousands of kilometers per hour. It weighs 4 tons. There's no pilot on board. And the rockets don't even have wings, so how are we going to fly it back to Earth? Well, they came up with clever ways to use engines and software, and now they bring the engines back, and they've done that 300 times. So that's really thinking outside the box. It's option X. Now, how about back to IBM's big, audacious goal of this open, transparent, and trusted software? What did they do? Well, as we heard this morning from Dinesh, they paired up to take AI open. In fact, they said the future of AI is open. That's a big move by IBM to say that. And of course, with Meta, they formed the AI Alliance for all the advantages that we've heard about, speeding up development, bringing more positive impact to our society. They also decided, hey, let's take those 10 models we have that are vetted best-in-class models and make them open source. Let's put them in the Watson X Foundation library available for people to use. And then the really interesting part about what Dinesh said this morning is how we develop the model itself and then how we train the model. They started off with a set of AI ethics for both the model and the training. If you go on IBM.com, there's an amazing, very thorough document on the ethics involved. It's available to anyone. It's open. I read it. It's absolutely incredible. And so we want to make sure that the model and the training honor the values and practices in our society, right? In terms of being trusted and transparent, IBM also said, when we make the models, let's be very open about how we're going to make them, what data we're going to use, and we're going to have a governance process that's going to judge all of that. So I've read of cases where IBM was developing one of the Granite models, and they dismissed 75% of the data that was going to be used because of this governance model, trying to get things out of the pathway that were ethically wrong, biased, had security risks, etc. So these are really, really well-developed models and trained very well. And the results prove for themselves. The models are faster, they're more accurate, they're smaller. In fact, I read at Think 2024 that some of the models were 85% smaller than their competitor models. So IBM has developed these by these big ideas. Now for me, on my pathway to becoming an astronaut, 15 years after that picture was taken at Disneyland, I ended up in the hospital for 11 days fighting for my life. So I'm trying to become an astronaut. I end up in the hospital almost dead. So for 11 days, I had internal bleeding. They'd put blood in, blood would come out. They finally found out what was wrong. I had surgery, and so I left the hospital with my life, also with a big scar, but still with that dream to become an astronaut and also a new way to live life by. Anytime you have a near-death experience, it does change the way you think, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, a year after this incident, it was time to go to university, and to be an American astronaut, you had to be a military pilot. So I applied to the United States Air Force Academy and was immediately rejected because of the medical event that had happened a year earlier. In fact, I was told you'll never be allowed to be an American military pilot. That's really bad news when this is your dream, because the only way to be an American astronaut was to be a military pilot. And so that day that I got rejected, I remember I had a big crying session with my parents. But you'd be surprised to hear that within a couple days, I was already trying to think, how can we keep this dream alive? And I knew that dream would make me happy. If you look inside the helmet, you'll notice a very big smile there, a very big smile there. So I knew that would make me happy. So within a couple days, I had pivoted and decided to find a university that was a good engineering school. They had an airport nearby. They had a flying club. And also they were really good at the sport I played, which was called water polo. And I hoped that while I was at Stanford, NASA would change the rule. And so I attended Stanford. And then when I was done with Stanford, I ended up going to work for IBM, and that was a super easy decision, as I tell you. So here's a picture from the old days at IBM. While I was at Stanford, NASA did change the rule and started accepting non-military pilots. So I had also earned my pilot's license at Stanford. In any case, I was eligible to apply to NASA, which I did, to become an astronaut. My IBM managers knew I was doing that and were very supportive. And after I applied, I got a letter back from NASA about 2 months later that said, "We don't want you. We don't want you." And I was absolutely crushed. But again, when you're pursuing these big goals, you're not going to stop, right? I got really good to this cycle because over a 10-year period, NASA rejected me 4 times. Each time they say, "We don't want you," and they don't tell you why. And so this picture really is just a demonstrative of the third thing that happens when you have this mindset that I'm talking about, and that's that you don't give up. If that goal is really meaningful to you, you don't give up. And so you can call that perseverance, resilience, bravery, but there's a nice short word that we use to describe it now, and it's called grit, G-R-I-T. And so I kept pursuing the dream. I put together a plan, and in those days we didn't have software to do schedules, so this is a hand-drawn schedule. And of course I started thinking of options that would help me increase my odds. The whole goal when you send an application into NASA to be an astronaut is to have your application picked for the interview round. So last year we got 18,000 applications. You can imagine if there was a stack of them here, you want one of the 100 that they pull out. So you're trying to make the interview round. And so I read books. As you see on the left there, I learned to fly more airplanes. But those are kind of options A and B from the past. So I tried to become more creative. I wrote the astronauts themselves. That's a letter to Dr. Sally Ride, an American astronaut, asking for advice. They wrote me back. But I realized that if I just applied a fifth time, it wouldn't have made any difference. So I came up with what I call option X. I decided I would leave IBM and go work for NASA with the hopes that if I went to Houston, they would observe my soft skills, my engineering skills, how I communicated, was I dependable, etc. And so when I got a job offer from NASA, I went to my IBM manager, who knew I had this dream, and told him that I'd been offered a job at NASA. And he actually said, "Steve, we're fully supportive. Why don't we put you on leave so you'll remain an IBM employee and you can go work for NASA and see what happens." So the pictures on the right are me at the Johnson Space Center as a flight controller. Those are not pictures from me at IBM. So that's me as a NASA employee. That strategy worked perfectly. 107 days after I got to NASA, my application was pulled out of that pile. I got a call from the astronaut selection office and said, "We're offering you to be in the interview round." I was ecstatic, of course. One day later, my NASA manager came to my office and said, "I heard yesterday you got an interview opportunity. I'd like you to decline it, to not accept it." I was stunned, absolutely stunned. I was 31 years of age. I was getting worried about being picked. In any case, my manager said, "If you're selected, it would be about a year after you started working for us, and that's not really fair to me, your manager, or to the team." Well, I was really confused and really angry. In the next 3 days, I flew back to California. I got married to my wife, Peggy. We flew to Hawaii for our honeymoon. And when I got to Hawaii for our honeymoon, I had to call the astronaut selection office and just tell them what had happened and what I was going to do. So I called the astronaut selection office from Hawaii on the first day of my honeymoon. And Dwayne Ross, the manager, answered. I said, "Dwayne, thank you for the interview opportunity, but I'm going to decline it." The phone was silent for what seemed like a long time. And then in a voice that I'll never forget, sounded like an adult voice, he said, "Steve, no one's ever done that to us before." So that's an option X. That's me saying I'm in it for the long haul. I'll take my chances that 2 years from now, I'll get another opportunity. So sometimes you just have to take these big, unusual steps. In any case, I flew home for my honeymoon, worked for that same NASA manager for 2 more years. It was quite difficult, and was interviewed the next time and was selected. So let's move on to what it's like to fly in space. So here you see a picture of me with my wife, Peggy. We've been married 35 years. The day before launch, you're allowed to take your spouse to the launch pad. So on the left, that's Peggy and I standing in front of Space Shuttle Endeavour for my first launch. And then the other picture is 7 years later, Peggy and I in front of Space Shuttle Atlantis, the day before my launch on Atlantis. And what I'd like to bring your attention to in this picture is look at Peggy's posture and the smile on her face. She looks totally relaxed, even though the next day her husband's going to take a big risk. And the reason I show this picture is because the job of an astronaut is mission-driven, just like your work is mission-driven. And Peggy understood that. She is smiling and relaxed on this very stressful day, not only because of her personality, but because she knew that the work I was doing would make the lives of people better, including the lives of our own children. And so it's stunning for me to look back in those pictures. So we wear this orange suit for the launch and the entry in case something bad happens and we have to jump out of the spaceship. It comes with a parachute, helmet, and gloves, and also a life raft in case we end up in the Atlantic Ocean. And it's orange, of course, so they can find us quickly in the water. This is the best part of the job. We leave the launch pad, and 8.5 minutes later, we're going 25 times the speed of sound. So it's an incredible ride. There's violent shaking inside. It's almost hard to read the computer screens in front of you. They're kind of jumping around. There's this massive acceleration. So I weighed 3 times my normal body weight. So I weighed about 270 kilos going into space. But there's also this massive happiness because I was 35 years of age when I was finally in space for the first time. So an incredible part of the journey. And I can tell you that inside the spaceship was not scared at all. And that's because we were so thoroughly prepared. Once we're in space, it's this magical place where there's no gravity. So here I am floating on the space station. You'll notice I'm not wearing any shoes because we're just floating around. I wish we could turn gravity off in here so you could understand what it feels like. It would be wild with all the chairs floating around. But you could just move from one side of the room to the other by flying, just touching the wall with one finger, and you would just fly across the room. It's absolutely incredible. You'll notice that I have 2 watches on. That's because we're going so fast. We go around the world every 90 minutes, 90. That means in one 24-hour day, I go around the world 16 times. So the sun rises 16 times, and it sets 16 times. Night, day, night, day. So it's very confusing. So I kept one watch on mission time. That's the gold and silver watch. And the black watch is set on the time where Peggy and the kids were. So it's an extremely magical place to be. Since we're flying around just by touching the wall and flying around, we don't get any exercise. Your bodies tend to wither in space. They get weaker and weaker. So we have to exercise every day, and we have special equipment to do that. On the right, you see Sunny, running on the treadmill. She's got special straps to hold her on the treadmill. Upper left-hand corner is Nicole. She's riding an exercise bike. She actually has a seatbelt on. Otherwise, she would fly off the seatbelt. Of course, if she rides the bicycle for 90 minutes, she's ridden the bicycle all the way around the world. Everybody does that. And then Kochi in the lower left-hand corner is lifting weights. We can't have normal weights in space, so that's a hydraulic system. The space station astronauts who are in space for 6 months work out an hour and a half per day. There's also no shower in space, of course, because water wouldn't fall on your head. So we take waterless shampoo with us and waterless body wash. You basically squirt it into your hand, rub it in your hair, and take a towel and dry it off. This is Karen Nyberg washing her hair. Sleeping in space is pretty awesome. We have Velcro on our sleeping bags. There's Velcro on the walls and the ceilings. And so you can sleep anywhere you want. I usually slept on the wall or the ceiling. That's me on the wall in the background there. I used to have a mustache. Before you fall asleep, you should definitely put your arms inside the sleeping bag or else they'll float around all night. It's pretty strange to see someone's hand float by at night. And you'll also notice we have a seatbelt across our head because otherwise our head would fly around. If you look closely, by the way, by my head, you'll see a couple think pads that are actually Velcro to the wall. We had 11 think pads with us on that flight. The way we train for our spacewalks is in a pool where we can pretend we're in space. The giant pool is 20 meters deep, and we have pretend spaceships in the pool, and we wear pretend spacesuits so that we can practice our spacewalks in the pool so we can do the real spacewalks. So here I am with the Hubble Space Telescope in the white suit. We're traveling over Australia. You'll notice off my hip I have a wire attached to me. That's in case if I lose my grip, I can just pull myself back in. You'll notice the Earth does have a curvature to it, in case any of you are still thinking it's flat. So it is a curved surface. Let's see, let me now switch gears completely away from technology, away from flying in space, and just pass along a little life hack that I have for you, a little life hack for you. Life is busy. Life is very busy. And so as a new astronaut, this slide depicts all the things I had to learn about, different spacesuits, how to fly the airplane, how to fly the shuttle, what was Hubble like. Eventually we added the space station to this, etc. So incredibly busy life, so much to remember. And then when I would go home, I'd have my family also, right? I wanted to be a good husband to Peggy, a good child to my parents, a good citizen in the community. And then 47 days after I became an astronaut, the first baby arrived. And so now I have to be a good dad too. And so this is all describing how hectic and how overwhelmed we are in our lives each day. And yet wanting to be the best at all of them, all of our different roles. I wanted to be the best astronaut, the best husband, the best son, the best dad, the best community member. So what's the key to being able to do all those things? Well, my lesson comes from that hospital visit. Remember I told you I came away thinking different from 2 West 42. And that's how to live life joyfully and balanced. And so I have 3 words for you. Simplify your life. Simplify your life to find balance and the ability to chase these big dreams. There's 3 easy steps. The first is you have to have a priority list. You always have to know what's higher on the list and what's lower. You don't have to have it written down, but you have to have it in your mind. So when I fly the NASA T-38, it has 127 dials and buttons, etc. in the cockpit. You don't just jump in and turn it on and then take off, right? You have to have a priority list. And so in red, I've outlined the 3 most important instruments. And so the way you fly the T-38 is you look at those 3 instruments, look at the rest, come back to those 3, look at the rest, come back to those 3, and always make sure those 3 are the highest priority. So you have to have a priority list. You also want to get rid of the noise in your life. This is a display from the local library that I study at sometimes, and the theme that month was to get rid of the clutter, etc. in your life. So you want to get rid of the noise in your life, not just the sound noise, but all the other things that take so much of our attention. So maybe you have too many things. Maybe there's something on your priority list you want to get rid of. Maybe there's a relationship from decades ago that's just too much work for you. Maybe the internet is too much noise, right? We get all this email information from people, so we want to unsubscribe from those. Okay, so you want to get rid of the noise low. The final thing you want to do is quit wasting time. It's really hard to say that to such an esteemed group. It's not something that I've ever mastered or you will ever master, but every day it's a struggle. But if you can save just 10 minutes a day, at the end of the year, it's 3 full days you'll have. So what are ways to save time? Maybe you have meetings that are too long or too many meetings. Or maybe the internet is this black hole that you spend too much time on. Or maybe there's something on your priority list. And of course, all the young people will tell you to learn keyboard shortcuts, right, to save time. So that is simplifying your life. Here I am with the spacewalk on the space station with Atlantis behind me. So let me close with one more story that kind of will bring several of the concepts together. So I did tell you that the Air Force rejected me once and NASA rejected me 4 times. And I did tell you that when I came back from Hawaii after declining that interview offer, that I worked for 2 more years and received the phone call for the interview round. That was true. So I did go to the astronaut selection office. I got the application. I filled it out. It was a very, very long application. I turned that application in. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the astronaut selection office to come over and meet with them, which I did. And when I sat down in the office, they gave me the letter that I'm about to show you. It's on the right side of the next display, and it's heavily redacted because it has medical information in it. But that letter on the right says, you are disqualified from being an astronaut forever because of the medical incident you had 20 years ago. So now NASA has said, don't even apply again. Don't come back again. We don't want to ever talk to you again. And so I left that meeting absolutely gutted, absolutely just so disappointed, of course. Because at that point, the pathway to becoming an astronaut looked blocked, absolutely blocked. But this mindset that I've talked about, where we come up with option X along the way when something bad happens, reminded me that we believe that obstacles are only on the path. They don't block the path. So I had to come up with some option X. So I thought about it for 2 days and thought of an idea. So I went back to the astronaut selection office. They were not happy to see me, but I'm so thankful that they listened. And I told them this was my suggestion, that using my money, I would ask that one of their doctors I would pay would have me go to a hospital that that doctor named, and at that hospital, I would have a certain medical procedure where they could go inside my body and look around to see if everything was okay. Then they could take that data and maybe waive the rule. They agreed. They agreed. So 2 weeks later, I went to Houston's Herman Hospital. That doctor performed that procedure. That information was given to the NASA doctors. 2 weeks later, they held a meeting to go over the results. I was not invited, but they called me that night and told me the results of that meeting. During that meeting, they took a vote and decided to waive the rule. Then they took a second vote. And in that second vote, they decided to delete the rule so no one would ever have to go through that again. And so that's all to say, I encourage you every day to set these really audacious goals for whatever duration the things are. So that's the audacious part. To do it for as long as it takes, and along the way, come up with these option X's. So with that, a couple administrative things. One is I have my NASA jacket with me here. I'm going to put it on and go out into the lobby here. There's a photo backdrop. I'll be there all evening. If you have questions or want to take pictures. But I want to thank you again, not just for attending today, but for the work that you do, because it's making people's lives better. And I suggest that you remember that every day. Now, these are super exciting times for AI. There's nowhere better in the world to be today and tomorrow to learn about GenAI and have the government of Kerala and IBM open up the idea to have this worldwide hub for AI here. It's really a spectacular opportunity. With that, on behalf of the government of Kerala and IBM and my dad and my family, we wish you great success in your journey. And again, thank you for making the world a better place. So thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Smith. And so we request you to stay back for a moment, as we have a plaque that is going to be given away. So if we can have you right at the center, and everybody in the house, put your hands together one more time. What an absolute pleasure and privilege it has been to have the former NASA astronaut, Sir Stephen Smith.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Take a picture.